Hi guys, it's week 6 of Sisters in Shape Adventures in Competing, which means we're at the halfway point. Just over 6 weeks until the competition, and you get to see Erica and Stephanie and I on stage strutting our stuff. This week's topic is nutrition. So at this point, with just over 6 weeks left, I've started to do something called carb cycling. And carb cycling is something that a lot of competitors do in order to get the last little bit of fat off their bodies, because it's very, very effective, to be honest. But it's also very difficult. And one of the things you have to understand first is what your macros are and how those fit into the grand scheme of things. So I wanted to kind of give you a rundown of what some of the things that I use for my macronutrients are. So macronutrients are carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. And then fiber is kind of off in its own little world, but it's considered a macronutrient by some people as well. I don't count fiber as a macronutrient because it doesn't play into my calories, but I do make sure that I get lots of fibrous foods because fiber is very important for your diet. So I've kind of set up my 3 different categories, and I'll show them to you now. So these are my carbohydrates. This is mostly on my high carb day. I pretty much don't have any of these things on a low carbohydrate day, simply because I get enough carbohydrates from vegetables. So we have some gluten-free rolled oats, some rice with some quinoa mixed in. I also use just plain quinoa, but I think this is a really good blend. Some Greek yogurt, which also has very high protein, but it is just a little bit higher in carbs, so I kind of count it in with my carbs. Then we have the fruit, so we have things like bananas and raspberries. I also use apples, cherries, any other kind of berry because they are low glycemic. So that's kind of my carbohydrates. Then we have over here, we have good sources of fats. So this right here is one of my absolute favorite things. It's P28 protein peanut butter, and they have a bunch of different flavors. It's high protein peanut butter, it's got whey mixed into it, but I still count it as a fat because it's actually got, per 2 tablespoons, about 17 grams of fat, which is very high. We've got our whole almonds, which are one of the best nuts for you, an avocado, and some organic coconut oil. I also use organic butter. I know that a lot of people really stay away from butter, but if you buy organic or grass-fed butter, it can actually be very good for you. So I do have other sources of fats in my diet, other nuts, other oils, like olive oil is really good for you. And there's obviously fats in other foods, which brings me to my proteins. So within my proteins, I have lean protein sources and fatty protein sources, and this will depend on the day. But so some of my lean protein sources are things like turkey breast, which I have here, some pork tenderloin or female bacon, some egg whites, so some canned tuna there, and these are some meatloaf muffins made out of ground turkey, which are fabulous, and I will link to the recipe on my blog. But they're Jamie Eason's turkey meatloaf muffins, and they're one of my favorite snacks, especially on low carbohydrate days. So then as far as fattier meat sources go, I have some grass-fed sirloin here, so it is well marbled, so I'll only have this on a low carbohydrate day when I need more fats. I have some canned salmon here. Salmon is a very fatty fish, but it's wonderful for you, lots of omega-3s. And a good old egg. So obviously the yolk in there has a lot of fats, but it's also where all of the vitamins are stored, so don't be afraid to eat the whole egg. So there are my fats again, proteins, carbs. So now that we have what our macronutrients actually are and what those look like, we can go into what carb cycling is and how it works. I do fairly simple, for this prep I'm doing low carb, no carb, high carb, or possibly do 3 days, so low carb, no carb, low carb, high carb, depending on the day. And the reason you do this is to make sure that your body's burning fat. So when you do a very low carbohydrate diet, such as the Atkins diet, your body goes into something called ketosis. And ketosis is where your body is burning fat instead of carbohydrates as fuel. Carbohydrates are your body's preferred source of fuel. So if there's carbohydrates in your system, it's going to use those. Your muscles actually store carbohydrates. If you carry a lot of muscle like I do, you might have as much as 300 grams of carbohydrates in your muscle, plus an additional 50 grams in your liver. So you have to use those up. Your body uses anywhere from 50 to 200 grams of carbohydrates a day, depending on how much activity you're doing. So it's not too hard to burn through your body's stores of carbohydrates, but you're probably going to need more than one day to do it. So you eat very low carbohydrates, your body goes through all those carbohydrates, and then it has to turn to another source of energy. Well, the best source of energy aside from carbohydrates is fats. This can be in the form of body fat, ideally, or it can be from dietary fat. But either way, your body's processing fat for energy, and if it's processing it from your diet, it's going to learn how to do that, and it can pull from your body fat as well. And it will pull from your body fat over top of your muscle. But there's downsides to low carbohydrate diets. I'm sure many of you have had friends or colleagues that have done the Atkins diet and notice that their mood drops pretty considerably. You can suffer some pretty bad mood swings when you're doing low carb. It also can make your breath smell, and it just generally has bad impacts on your energy levels. And if you're not really careful with making sure you get enough vitamins and vegetables and stuff like that, it can be a non-nutritive diet. So there's some problems with that. It's also potentially low fiber depending on how many vegetables you're getting. So in order to combat that, you have these high carb days. Carbs are great. Like I said, your body uses them as its prime source of energy. But they have other functions too, such as raising something called leptin in your body. And leptin is the thing that makes you feel satiated. It sends signals to your body that says, I'm full, I've been fed, I'm happy, I don't need to go out and kill anything, we're good. So if you go too long without eating carbohydrates, your leptin levels can really drop. You'll get intense hunger cravings. You'll crave really sugary things instead of complex carbs like oats and rice and things like that. You'll crave sugar in the form of processed foods. So it can really play mind games. So if you do a high carb day every 2 to 3 days, it's not only good for your body, but it's really good for your mind as well. And these can coincide with your cheat meals as well. It's actually really good to put a high carb down on a day you know you might be cheating. Your body actually needs these carb refeeds, some people call them, in order to function well too in the gym. Because it's your preferred source of energy, it's very hard for your body to function well on a low carbohydrate diet where most of your energy is coming from fats. If you're doing really hard workouts, it takes longer to process fat than it does to process carbs, and you're going to tire out a lot quicker, which means you're going to lose intensity, you're not going to be working out as hard, and that's going to hinder your results. So yes, you might burn a lot of fat with a low carbohydrate diet, but if you can't do the intensity in the gym, you're kind of balancing it out. It's not giving it your all in exercise and diet. You need both, right? So how do you actually structure a carb cycle? On a low carbohydrate day, you're going to be having your fatty protein sources and a lot of vegetables, especially green vegetables. Those are the ones that are lowest in carbohydrates and have the most nutrients as well as the most fiber. So they're really good for you on low carbohydrate days. You're going to have next to no grains, no fruit, and definitely nothing with sugar in it. The reason you want the fatty protein sources in there as well as more of the fat sources is because that's your source of energy for the day. If you have mostly protein, you're going to run into intestinal issues. It's really hard on your kidneys, and it can generally play havoc with your system. So make sure that your fats are actually your highest source of energy for the day. Keeping in mind that there's 9 calories for every gram of fat. So it doesn't need to be the highest grams per day, it just needs to be the highest percentage of calories per day. And that'll help with your overall mood, making sure that your brain functions high. A lot of the problems associated with low carbohydrate diets have to do with people not having enough fat and using mostly protein as a source of energy. And when you use protein as a source of energy, you're actually training your body to break down protein. And what's protein? It's muscle. You're training your body to break down muscle for energy. That's going to be really bad if you're trying to retain muscle on your diet. Mine is, on a no-carb day, I get about 40 to 45 grams of carbohydrates, about 80 to 90 grams of fats, and about 130 to 150 grams of protein. On a low-carb day, I'll get 80 to 90 grams of carbs, 60 to 80 grams of fats, and about the same 130 to 150 grams of protein. Then on a high carb day, these are the ones that you really need to pay attention to your timing. You want to get the majority of your carbohydrates around that really tough workout that we're going to schedule. And when you do that, you're really supplying the energy to your body in the time it's using it most effectively. You're also going to shuttle all of those carbs into your muscles so that it's stored within the muscles and not in fat, because that's not what we want. So if you're working out in the morning, make sure you have a breakfast that's high in carbohydrates. I had oats this morning, even though it was super early and I really didn't want to eat that much. I had my oatmeal, went and did my leg workout, had a banana with a protein shake afterwards, and then had a carb-heavy lunch with some quinoa, like twice the amount that I would normally have. And then now I'm starting to taper my carbs off towards the end of the day. You want to make sure that your carbohydrates are high enough that you're actually replenishing your carbohydrate stores. So for me, I'm getting over 200 grams of carbohydrates at a minimum, probably closer to 225 grams of carbs throughout the day. And if there's a cheat meal involved, that might go as high as 275, maybe even 300. But that would require me to raise my calories for the day as well, which is usually what happens on a cheat meal day. And on those days, you really want to make sure that you drop your fat right down. You don't want to have two sources of energy on a high carbohydrate day. You want your body to be replenishing those glycogen stores and not using the fat as energy. So I'll drop my fats down to maybe 30 grams per day, and then the rest of my calories are coming from protein. So that's kind of the breakdown of the macronutrients for your carb cycles. So that's a bit of a summary of carb cycling, which is what I'm doing now. It's super effective and it keeps you sane. So if you want to give it a try, look it up. I'll put some links. Hopefully this has been helpful, and remember, eat clean, train dirty, and think nerdy. Bye guys.